wants their machines in and keep pressuring. And the guy says no. The tavern owner says no, we're not going to do it. He eventually gets pressured into it. And then he is approached by the police to operate as an undercover mob agent to record the mob with his giant tape recorder and to bring them all down. And his family moves to Corvallis to get out of the way for a while.
It's over the river and through the woods. It's how you get to Corvallis.
Totally, yes. And so the story revolves around him going undercover with his giant tape recorder and recording the different things the mob says.
And then he has various adventures undercover.
Yeah. And for, like we said, this movie is just over an hour, and it really felt way longer than that.
It did.
And I think
it felt normal movie length.
Yeah.
But then when you see it's only just over an hour, you're like, oh, wow.
There is nothing here. So, yeah, that it is based on a barely page-long article in Life magazine makes perfect sense that you showed me that.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the plot points in the movie that were kind of interesting. So before, so when the mob is pressuring our tavern owner into the slot machines, the tactics that they use to force their slot machine, their pinball machines into the tavern. Why don't you tell us what they did to encourage?
Well, when the tavern owner, what is the tavern owner's name? The main
George.
George. Yeah, George is the main character. He's the tavern owner who's saying no and goes undercover. And so to pressure him into it, are you talking about the bottle?
Yeah.
So they put him in a chair, and they're gonna interrogate him, and they take out this tiny little apothecary-looking bottle with a cork in it, and they take the cork out, and some steam or some vapor comes out to indicate that it's some sort of crazy acid, and then they drip it on something, don't they?
They drip it on his hand.
Oh,
They're
that's
like,
right.
It burns,
doesn't it? And then he's like, are you going to put that in my eyes? And they say, no, we're going to put it on your daughter. And so he's threatening the daughter.
This movie's attitude towards violence against women.
It was insane. So they introduced that. And and the other thing that right off the bat got me was when they were going through the credits and Frank Gorshin's name came up.
Yes.
And Mark, do you know who Frank Gorshin is?
I have
This
no
is
idea.
the only person in the credits, the name that I recognize.
Right. And Frank Gorshin played the Riddler on the 60s Batman show.
Oh, okay.
And so that's how I'm like, oh, fun. The Riddler's going to be here. Oh, the Riddler's a pedophile.
And a rapist.
And a rapist, yeah. So so as his mob, he's part of the mob, Frank Gorshin is, his creepy character, and they all mention, like, oh, is this going to be just like it was in Jersey, or I forget, they had all moved from somewhere, I guess, because he had apparently had relations with someone.
They alluded that he had just got out of jail because he says, I did a stint for that. I did my time for that.
That's right.
And so clearly he had raped and had an
underage girl.
Underage girl.
Yeah.
And
so he is a child predator.
Right. And now
Frank Gorshin, the Riddler.
The family, the mob, the labor union there, the guys were like, well, you're not, it's not going to be like last time, is it? Oh, no, we've got the solution now. He's only going to be with old women that are older than 60 years old, and that will be better.
Yeah, and he kept promising, but then they like sicked him on her. Like, she walked out. The mob didn't know that he had a daughter, and they see the daughter, and they were like, "Hey, Frank, wake up! Like, go get her." And he does.
And then they proceed to have a especially for this time period, very violent attack, assault, attempted rape scene.
It was unbelievable.
It was shocking.
So I wrote that down too. I was like, this is legitimately awful.
It was disturbing, even by like today's standards, what you would see in something of like Game of Thrones of a woman being attacked.
Yeah, and there's no nudity, but I mean, it was very like
visceral.
Yeah, and that's what I felt too. I was like, this is not okay,
uncomfortable,
very dark.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I was noticing that the only actor that I really liked in this movie is the girl who played the daughter, whose name is Ruth. Ruth is the daughter's name, and she was really good. And I wrote one of my last notes was, I love Ruth. I want her to have a better life. Because right before she gets raped by the Riddler, she's in a car with her high school boyfriend who tries to rape her.
Basically, every interaction between Ruth and a man goes south fast.
Yeah, that is not her father.
Yeah.
And yeah, so she walks out of the car with her boyfriend trying to make the moves because at this point George the father has put the pinball machine. He has been forced to put him in the thing, and so like the high school boyfriend's like, I know what your dad does. That means you're loose or whatever he said. He said something very
You've
specific.
been around.
You've been around.
You've been around.
And then he wants to take her to a hotel, I think.
Yeah, and so she slaps him and says no and walks out right into Frank Gorshin's arms.
Right.
Throws her against a tree, and yeah, it was crazy.
But then Frank Gorshin, they take him and they give him what they call the lonely hobo treatment.
It's true. It's true. Oh, like he's a lonely hobo.
And what is the lonely hobo treatment?
They drive him out to the railroad tracks, and
First they bludgeon him.
they bludgeon him.
Yeah, that's right.
And
With one of those classic like mob heavy.
Yeah, the little
things.
heavy bag things.
They're like,
there's got to be a name for one of those.
beating them in their hands.
Yeah.
just in the back seat of their car. And so like
Yep.
bloodied up the back seat of their car.
They drive into the warehouse. They open the door and
And
pound him in the face a couple more times in the seat.
and then
drag
they
him out to
drag him out to the railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train.
And the guy that drags him out there is laughing
And he's
maniacally.
laughing
He is having a great time.
His
joyously.
eyes are like wide.
What I did appreciate about that, because up until that point, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be like we were talking right before we started recording about a movie called Sleepaway Camp, which is a horror movie, a really terrible horror movie from the early '80s. And there's a character in there at the camp, an adult that is constantly telling everyone around him that he's going to get with these 12 and 13-year-old girls. And no one, I mean, I know it was the late 70s, early 80s, but nobody had a problem with that. And so I'm watching this, and I'm watching that scene that you said was disturbing. I'm like, this movie's not going to have any, like, they're barely going to care. Like, it's going to be one of those things. So I was really happy when the mob was like, no, this is not acceptable. Like, we kill people and we steal stuff and we, all of this stuff, but this is too far. And so I really did like
That was surprising.
how they did that too, of all things.
This movie was woke. What else?
What else?
stood out?
There's one other part that stood out. I was talking about a little before, and I didn't tell you why. But there's a part. So George also has a son who is maybe 13 or 14 or something.
Little
like that.
Timmy?
Little Timmy, who has nothing to do in the movie except he has this really weird sidebar conversation with her sister's boyfriend, and they're all getting ready to move down to Corvallis to get out of the way of the mob.
Corvallis, get it right.
Corvallis. And the son, Timmy, is loading up his stuff, and he has a little pet rat, and he's chasing this little rat around the house. And I noticed, and so they're talking about him, Timmy and the older boyfriend guy are talking about the name of the rat. So I'm going to play you a little clip here, Tim.
What's this Benny bit?
Just a name. Only a name. Kind of cute, ain't it? Cute name for a rat.
So this movie came out in 1957, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
So there is a famous, and which we've talked about on our other show before, and Mark has no idea, but there's a Michael Jackson song from the early 70s called Ben. And it's I can play a tiny bit of it on
It's
right.
starting to come together.
Michael Jackson. So I feel like everyone's heard it, but it is the movie, the song came up, it was for a movie called Ben, which was about a pet rat.
Right.
Which was a sequel to a movie called Willard that came out in 1971.
Right.
And so for my whole life, Ben has been the name of this Michael Jackson song about a rat named Ben. And here Ben shows up in this movie as a rat in 1957.
And he's making a joke about it being
Yeah.
a funny name.
Yeah.
Was Willard or Ben a remake?
I don't think so, because there has been a Willard remake with...
Okay.
So here's the...
No more
It's this very sweet song about how Michael Jackson's only friend can be a rat because nobody else understands him, and it's kind of tragic. But yeah, it was a really weird confluence of things to be so specific.
I could tell that the movie was trying to say something there, and it was lost on me.
And so
I was
yeah,
like,
that was
what? Ben? Was that another character?
No, that was his name. That was the boyfriend's name.
Oh,
it was also the rat's name.
Right. He named the rat after the boyfriend.
Why would he do that?
Because he hates the boyfriend. That's the whole joke.
I didn't get that at all.
No.
I didn't get it
Wait a
either.
minute. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Okay, so
I mean, I believe you, but I didn't get
okay,
it.
so before the first scene where we see the kids, Timmy ribs the mom about the boyfriend. Says Benny, oh, he's terrible, basically, and so Timmy hates the boyfriend.
Okay.
Okay, and so then, the next scene where they're all taking place, he is moving the rat, and he drops the rat, and the rat scurries away, and he's calling after the rat, Benny. And he's like, well, what'd you call him? Benny. Well, why'd you call him? Oh, it's just a funny name. Wink, wink.
Oh.
And then the girlfriend clarifies it and says, oh, well, he only did that, to get at me because, and
right.
oh, he's just doing regular brother things.
Okay, I guess
Wow.
if you take away the fact that it's the name of the boyfriend, that scene relates to nothing.
Yeah, and it's never brought up again. The rat's never seen again or talked
Yeah.
about it. The rat doesn't have anything to do with the main storyline.
I thought that was a really weird
I just thought it was
subplot.
crazy that it was Ben the rat, which
Right, it was Benny the rat, named after the boyfriend, Benny.
well, it's still a crazy coincidence.
It was the fact he winks and says it's a coincidence. Going
Well, no. What I'm
it's
saying,
not a coincidence.
it's a coincidence that it's
that
the
it's
name
also
of the Ben.
So maybe
the
Michael
rat song.
Jackson,
They did the
plagiarized.
sequel to Willard, the story about a rat. Anyway, it was a crazy thing. Hey, so here's a question. So also in this movie, there's gambling. They bring in girls for escorts and prostitution into the tavern.
B-girls.
B-girls.
Bar girls. That's what
Is that what that stands
I had
for?
to look it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause they just-
B-girls
they keep-
it's a slang term for bar girls.
Oh.
And so they never, they alluded to a lot of prostitution, but they never clarified.
Right. They said escorts and B-girls.
Yeah.
I needed my Urban Dictionary 1957 edition.
Exactly.
There was a lot of 50s slang in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Everyone was a what do you call
A wise guy. Wise guy and dames and
There was a part, let's see if I can find it, that eventually, so the second mob that comes in and wants to put their machines on, that is controlled by a madam from Seattle, which is an older, unsinkable Molly Brown. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Yeah, because she flies down.
And I
Yeah.
think she wanted to expand the prostitution ring because they set her up with a house.
Right.
Right.
And so she comes down and she's explaining, which has a great little scene. We'll talk about the locations later, but at the Portland airport, which looks really fascinating in 1957. But she's explaining her models and escorts. And she says, and I'll play it here, and you guys can help me figure out the rest of it. She says, my models and escorts are all ladies, no ipsos, something, and no hopheads. And so I can't figure out what her slang is. So maybe you guys can help me clarify here. Let me back this up a tiny bit.
Hophead, and I provided just these people in the city.
I'm sure you did.
And my models and escorts are all ladies, no dipsos, no hophead.
No dipsos.
No dipsos? Does that mean
Yeah.
not dumb, maybe?
No, not dippy.
Hophead would be
Hop
alcoholic
dipsos.
or marijuana?
Hopheads.
Hothead, maybe?
I think it's hophead.
This language is impenetrable.
Yeah.
I'll play it one more time.
It's like we're watching Shakespeare.
I know.
Models and escorts are all ladies, no dipsos, no hophead.
Yeah, it's hopheads.
No dipsos and no hopheads.
Dipsos and hopheads.
Anyway, I thought that was pretty great. I liked her the best. She's my favorite character.
Hophead is an umbrella term for
if-
users of everything from cocaine to marijuana.
Okay, like they're all hopped up on
Which is a
goofballs.
jazz era term.
There we go.
No hopping.
So there was one other. Speaking of jazz and
Prostitutes.
and prostitutes, there was a song that keeps playing when they show exteriors of the tavern to like show that there's a party going on inside. And I want you guys to tell me what you think it sounds like from another movie from our childhood.
Oh, I just want to get this mob off my back.
This mod.
I know exactly what I was going to comment on that earlier.
So what did it remind you of?
That sounds exactly like the Enchantment Under the Sea dance from Back to the Future.
It sounds
Dun, dun, dun,
exactly
dun,
like
dun,
that. So
dun, dun, dun.
here's Enchanted Under the Sea.
Yeah.
So this is a song called Night Train, which is an old jazz standard. And so it played a couple times in the movie, and I was like, I am at the Enchanted Under the Sea dance. Yeah, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Trying to help Michael Jackson, Michael J. Fox keep himself hidden from his other self while he hurt his hand in
This
the.
movie would have been a lot more interesting with time travel.
If there was a time travel element to it.
That'd be awesome.
One thing that I noticed happened a couple of times in this movie. Okay, so this movie takes place in 1957. There is more than one reference to how things were 20 years ago.
I noticed that.
They said something like, "You guys belong in Chicago 20 years ago," and
Yep.
and then at the beginning, guy gets beat up, and he's like, "There are these goons, like real goons from 20 years ago."
Yeah. Well, I think for us, the 90s are so are so active in everybody's imagination because the millennial generation that's active right now, they grew up in the 90s.
Everything is
and
kind of
so
in
these
20-year chunks.
20-year chunks. And so if you're in the 50s and you're talking about anything to do with gangsters, you're talking about 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, and I guess especially Chicago then, like in the 1920s and 30s.
Well,
Yeah.
also interesting, so this is a noir movie, but 1957, that's like pushing the end of the film noir period.
Right.
So, in like 1937 is maybe arguably at the beginning, so it's kind of like a throwback.
Or
movie.
it was just a wildly outdated cash grab, which
Wildly
it seemed like if it's only
Nobody wanted a noir movie in
and
57.
barely an hour long,
Yeah.
and filmed in Portland, based on an article in Life magazine that's barely a page long.
It definitely had all the noir tropes, though. You had the bad guys and the funny names and the funny voices. There were fedoras and doors with hand-painted letters.
And
Yep.
voiceover.
Lots of angles from the ground up to the ceiling, the
So-
harsh shadows. Now,
Yep.
there's the one guy that George, our hero, keeps reporting to with his audio tape. And he's the guy with the phone in the bookcase.
Mhm.
And they always show him from behind. Do they ever show the front of him?
Yeah, so he's the leader of the other cartel. The other. There's two
The initial-
rivalry. I don't have my Word document up in front of me, but there's the name of the guy that runs the
Al Gray.
No.
Try another name, Todd.
No, Al Gray was the person referred to by that guy in charge with the
Right.
phone. Right, he goes,
Don't write this name
"Don't
down.
write this name down. Talk to Alfred Gray, and he's over in this building." Right, and that guy with the phone that we only see the back of was referred to by the guy that we see in the first scene selling the video games,
Mhm.
selling the pinball machine and
Right.
the jukebox. And so when he was at home and drunk, and George came over to his house and like, who was the guy that you were working for?
Okay.
I need to get his name, and it's in my black book. And so he gets his black book. Then he goes to a payphone
In the middle of a bridge.
in the middle of a
the wi-
bridge.
I laughed so hard. His tavern is on the edge of town. They keep saying, but like right by some, not like a highway bridge, but like a bridge in the country that would go over just a little piece of the river. And he walks out of his tavern. He walks past some trees. He gets on this trestle bridge, and like in the middle of a trestle bridge, giant payphone looking out over the water, and it was so funny.
And so he gets on the phone and is like, my phone at the tavern is tapped. I don't want to say my name unless I know that your phone is not tapped as well. Oh, you can.
My phone
trust
is not
me.
tapped.
My phone is not tapped. We're safe now. Like,
He's like, oh, okay, here's
Well,
all the information you
and
want from
my
me.
social security number is 570 what? And he's like, really?
I did notice
guess-
how easily trusted the secretive mob boss was to George. Oh, okay, if you say so.
And you need to take care of my family. All right,
Oh,
done.
all right, sure.
No
in
problem.
Corvallis, yeah, in
Corvallis.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out where the location. That was one of the locations we couldn't figure out was the actual tavern location,
Right. Yeah.
which
I
I
don't know
don't
if
think was a
we-
real tavern. I think it was just someone's house in the
Well,
woods.
so,
They kinda
yeah.
look like.
We don't have any exteriors of that. Like, there's no action that happens there, unlike like the Hill Villa
Yeah,
and other places where there was actual external
surroundings.
shots. The tavern really didn't have anything that was outside of the studio.
Right. I did have one more hilarious thing that I noticed. Whenever you go to community theater or you see a performance like that, and you look at the background extras, and there's a crowd scene where they have to be making noise, you do that thing where you just like to mimic
Hubbub.
mimic hubbub. And so I want you to listen. At the end they gathered together a group of bounty hunters,
Oh,
policemen.
yeah.
I think they might have been
Authorities.
Teamsters.
Whoever they were, they all took taxis to the raid, which was hilarious.
Radio cab.
Radio
Radio
cab
cab.
taxis. And so they're the whoever is in charge of this rabble in the crowd, rabble, says something, and you just hear them in the background. There's maybe 15 or 20 of them, and it really cracked me up.
You've also heard where the final proof, the records of these underworld operations are kept and heavily guarded. What are we waiting for? Let's go!
Oh, that was so great.
I missed that. That was great.
So yeah, I still don't quite know. So they were from the rival mob. So at the end, the mob wins? No, because they all get turned. Wait a minute.
So there's the bad mob and the good mob, basically. The good one is doing things the right way, and has a good cop on their side and has good people on their side,
Okay.
and ultimately get the laws changed in Washington D.C. There was like a 10-second view of
That's right,
the
at the very
nation's
end of the
capital.
Capitol building.
And
But this also implied, and I read a little bit about this, about how alcohol must have still been somewhat illegal at this time.
No, alcohol was not illegal, but the syndicates still sold moonshine because if they were able to sell their own alcohol, then they wouldn't have to pay taxes and stuff on it.
Okay. Because one of the other things I was reading about this time, that the OLCC started in 1933, just after the Prohibition. Because I thought that was weird that they were acting like alcohol was still illegal, and I was like, this is 1957. This is well after Prohibition, but yeah, they did keep saying like moonshine or
Not state-controlled alcohol
Yeah,
is still illegal,
okay.
and still is today.
yeah, I guess so. Illegal moonshine.
So speaking of locations, where were some of the other places that we saw in this movie? What did you see?
There was a lot, and now I don't have my list in front of me. There was a lot from like the PGE area. I noticed that they had, because there was not only a shot from the Portland Towers, there is an exterior shot of the Portland Towers front entrance sign and the tower building itself. But like we said, that opening shot of downtown is from there. So imagine if you were at the PGE Stadium and hovering about 100 feet above it.
Yep. Do you want me to start the slideshow?
Yeah, and then why don't you? Yeah, perfect.
And so let's
can
start
see the slideshow.
The slideshow, all of you out in podcast land.
slideshow.
Visual podcast is the way to success.
If they would like to see these photos, Todd, where should they go?
They can go to portlandatthemovies.com, and on the side of that is a map that shows all of the movies we have done so far for this show, with all of the different locations with different colored markers that you can click on and see the pictures from that movie and that location. So lots on the Hawthorne Bridge, of course. But Portland Exposé had quite... I was afraid because a lot of it was the tacky, like, interior-looking sets of a bad noir film, I guess, and I was afraid that it was going to be all of that. But they did a lot of establishing shots and a lot of, like, just driving down the road or walking down the streets.
It was cool.
That was really cool.
So the movie starts where you said of PG Park and looks out over. You can see Mount Hood in the distance, and this is what's downtown
before any of the skyscrapers were there.
Yep.
I mean, there's some taller office buildings, but none of the.
Yep. And then there's a clip from the entrance of Hill Villa, which is now Chart House, looking out over southeast, basically.
Yeah, and that's up on the on Terwilliger. If you go kind of up the mountain towards OHSU, there's that cool, and it's a beautiful view from up there.
Never been there.
It's really neat.
Cool.
Everybody should look up a picture of Hill Villa. The building, this is after the remodel, and it was boring looking, but when the Hill Villa was first built, it had a really cool look to the building. And then next to it, they had a gift shop that sold Indian curiosities.
Oh, wow. The other thing, a hilarious thing about the Hill Villa is, like, when they built it, it's up, on the side of that hill. It's way high up. And all of the pictures from when it's built, I mean, they just mowed down every tree within an acre. Like, not let's leave some of it. It's just like all mowed down to the ground. We will put our restaurant here.
Yeah, there's more of the Hill Villa, and you can see the Ross Island Bridge in the background.
Yeah.
And
so these are the same. Yeah, I believe these are the same shot as that original establishing shot, but with just panning in and zooming in a little bit. Which is really neat to see those. And so there's also an exterior of an old church that is in northwest Portland on, let me find the actual address. Which is on like northwest, where is it here? 11th and Trinity is a little place. It's kind of by the Fred Meyer. That's off of Northwest Burnside there, right when you go past Powell's and stuff like that, and across the 405. And there's also a location, so across the street from the church here, which is exactly looks like that still today. And then across the street, there's a location called Kelly's Hotel. That's kind of a flophouse hotel or whatever, which is also exactly the same if you look on the Google Street Maps.
Yeah, we'll see Kelly Hotel in just a second.
Yeah.
This is looking out over the Portland Rose Garden, over the city.
Yep.
And then there's
the mysterious tavern, or whatever they're calling it.
This is the Woodland
Tavern.
It looks like something on 26 out towards Sandy. And
I mean, it just kind of looked like a house that has an overhang, kind of like the old motel type looking thing, but more of a house.
Yeah.
With a pass-through in the driveway, I guess. This I haven't... There's a lot of great downtown pictures, and actually we'll put a link to... I'm starting a gallery album of places that we haven't identified yet, and here's a great downtown shot of some street that has an old neon furniture and loan sign, a great old Ford pickup, and a Studebaker-looking car, and I have no idea.
Almost looks like MLK or Grand.
Yeah, and it could be because they did a lot...
Or just like third up by Washington.
Yeah. So hopefully at some point we'll be able to pinpoint that one, but I'm not sure. It's just a great downtown shot. And there's the Portland Tower.
Portland Towers. And
so this is that spot. You see the church in the background of the guy, and then he's going into the Kelly Hotel there. And that was on
Hotel.
Northwest 11th and Trinity. There's a tiny little road called Trinity.
And
There's
this
there's
is-
the phone booth in the middle of the bridge.
feels like
That was right before he turned into Superman.
it almost
This does look like the
it's-
George Reeves version of the
Yeah.
Superman TV show.
Kind of looks like the Sandy River out by, as you go out to Troutdale.
It is
Oh.
definitely on a river
Yeah.
somewhere. But yeah, just a random. And so and Mark, you can talk about this a little. This building showed up called the Portland Labor Temple.
And that's where, that was the name of the office facilities for any of the unions back in the day, was the Labor Temple. And I found an article that referenced the original Labor Temple in Portland being at downtown, like 4th and Franklin. And this doesn't look like 4th and Franklin at all. But you found another reference.
So I posted a bunch of these pictures on Facebook a while ago from this movie, asking if anyone knew any of the locations, and this guy Siegfried, who is pretty knowledgeable about both movies and locations, said that this was on what is now MLK and Holiday, which is kind of by the convention center.
Okay.
It's the intersection of MLK right as it passes over I-84 underneath it. And so now it's like a coffee shop or like a pet sitting place or something like that. But it's down by the convention center, and then there's a second shot of a guy of George walking down the road, and in the background you can see that Labor Temple building. So he thought, and it does look like it from the pictures, although it's unsubstantiated, I guess, that it is around MLK, what is now MLK and Holiday.
Okay. Union Station gets a little scene.
So yeah, we got a nice
Hasn't
exterior shot of
changed a
that,
bit.
No, it really hasn't.
and an interior shot. The only thing that changes is that they have some scenes on the outside road where he's getting picked up, and the road, it's looking away from, like, down the road from the train station, which looks completely. It almost looks like the Vegas Strip. There's cafes, and right now it's the bus station.
It's
And
hopping.
yeah, so that was really interesting. To see that part, because there's no condos. But yeah, the inside of the building looks exactly the same. And
Yep.
what's now Wilf's? Is it still Wilf's restaurant, or is it different now?
I
I
don't
think it could be different now.
What does that say? The Man House?
Yeah, or the something house. I wrote it down earlier.
So there's a restaurant inside the train station.
Yeah. That I still don't know. That I think is somewhere up by PGE Park.
So, can you go back
right.
a slide? So this scene, this is the scene in the movie. It's after George is doing the audio recording, and he is signed up with the syndicate, and he's doing some work for them, and they send him to go pick up a package from Union Station, a package of narcotics, and that is one of the points that they lifted directly from the Life article.
Okay.
The Big Jim, he
being framed.
he had been arrested at some point for picking up narcotics at Union Station.
At Union Station. Wow.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
that's the Iron Horse restaurant in the background. And so
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think it was just for that. I don't think they would do that just for this movie, because it doesn't play in anything, and it's a big neon sign. So
Yep.
that was the restaurant in the 50s then.
And the Iron Horse being at the train station. That makes
Oh,
sense.
yeah.
See?
This movie's deep. And so here's the airport, which just looks. It reminds me of the Ontario airport when I was growing up. I grew up in
Yes.
Ontario, and it was all that outside,
Totally.
just flat roofed building with like probably
You drive up
rocks on top
right
of it.
up to the front door.
Yep, and get out, get right onto your plane.
Right.
You walk on the tarmac. So there's a couple tarmac shots with some great 50s airplanes when the Seattle Madam comes down to visit, and so George picks her up at the airport. And there's a great dine at Portland International Airport neon sign.
Portland
Yeah.
International Airport.
That's great.
So then there's this location, which was just like a little street get-together thing, when you can see the Steel Bridge in the background and what's called the Steel Bridge Cafe, which is no longer there. So it's at the base of the Steel Bridge where I don't know if they call it, but the R2D2 building. Have you guys ever heard it called that?
No,
No.
is that something you actually found reference to?
No, they just always. It's the building that is now by across, like it's across the street from the Chinese Gardens or the Japanese. Wait,
Oh,
is it
the
Japanese
Chinese
Garden?
Chinese
Garden.
Gardens. Yep.
And so it's just kind of a squat, kind of bluish,
Oh, I know.
rounded.
Okay. I know the one you're talking about.
Oh, it's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
The
this
big
building.
one. The modern building that's next. It's catty corner to the Lance. It's where the offices of Lance who are up on the second
Okay.
floor.
So anyway, this is the location that used to be there, and it's like on the corner of like Gleason and
Yeah.
Second, for the most part.
Yep. This is the entrance to the warehouse.
The warehouse is across the street from the Portland Armory. So this warehouse that they go into is now, I believe, a parking garage, but looks exactly the same as it did in 1957. And this building must have been built in the 20s or 30s because it's just an old brick, a really cool old brick building. So yeah, that is exactly the same. It's across the street from the Armory. And there's also, they did a couple establishing shots of the Portland waterfront, which is now Tomahawk Park, but back then was the
Harbor Drive.
Harbor Drive, which used to have a public market on it, and it had a huge building with these two tower things coming out, like a really long, maybe 2 or 3 story building with these two tower things
It's
coming
really
out of
neat.
it.
That was
It's
defining.
it's really cool looking, and it was the Oregon Journal building, and it was the KPOJ building for a while. It was the public market. We saw some pictures of it getting torn down. It got torn down in the 61 or something like that, or 63, so it didn't last a lot longer than...
Do you think that could be where the Saturday market is currently, and that's why there's a Saturday market?
I bet you anything that's where it is, because it went
Yeah.
in between where like the Hawthorne Bridge is and the Burnside Bridge.
Wow.
So that could be very well why there's a public market there now. But a really neat looking building.
Yeah.
But that's outside. Yeah, that's still outside the train station.
Yep. And that's it.
And our establishing shot. So a lot of very cool locations in this movie to see what things look like in 1947, especially just the lack of skyscrapers and just the openness that it felt like.
And there were lots of neon signs and
Yeah.
flashing lights that you just don't have now.
Yeah,
Very, very cool.
totally. What else did we have? You know what B-Girl stands for. So in this movie, when his family goes to Corvallis to lay low, and he's gathering information with his gigantic tape recorder, there's a point where the police say, "Okay, we've had enough. Thanks for your service." And George keeps on. He's like, "I'm in this all the way." And he like keeps putting himself in danger, going and infiltrating the mob to secretly. What is his motivation? Why is he doing that? He's already got what
he wanted a bigger part of the pies. Like what he kept referring to is like I wanted in, but getting more recordings wasn't gonna do that.
I thought it was revenge for what they did to his family.
You really want to put away. Well, he probably doesn't know that the guy that attempted to rape his daughter has already been killed and put in.
Well, and he just puts his family in more danger because they do end up, poor Ruth, after being attacked twice and then fleeing to Corvallis, still gets manhandled by some goons trying to find the dad's tapes. And so they kidnap her and bring her to the same place that they finally bring George after they discover his 80-pound tape recorder.
They're going to pour the bottle on her.
Yeah, that's right. That'll show him. I knew he was a wise guy.
He'll do what he does best.
I wrote down the Edgerly Arms building too, which is that building covered in ivy that I still don't quite.
I would
know
love
where
to
that
identify
is.
that, but
So yeah, maybe if you can help us, we'll put a link up on portlandthemovies.com to a gallery of places that we're still looking for from this movie and a couple other movies. We still need to crack Dr. Giggles, where that house exterior was shot. Yeah, I couldn't figure out that tavern because the way it was set up and decorated, it was like we were talking about. It was like their living room. I mean, they had like floor to ceiling, floral curtains.
Very, very country diner, family friendly.
I guess they packed the people.
Turned into a casino
once they got them pinball machines. Yep. Were jukeboxes considered gambling? Because that was also one of the things that they brought in. He's like, "Oh, I'll take this jukebox machine. At least I'll get my coin back on that one," or whatever he said.
It wasn't gambling. You get what you pay for.
It was just rock music, and that was considered enough of a vice to...
Exactly. And in that initial scene, he kept on trying to steer away from gambling. He's like, okay, I don't want more pinball machines. I'll take one, but I'll definitely do the jukebox because it's not gambling.
Right. Yeah. Well, now I want to know when pinball machines introduced the flipper.
That's a
Because
good
how
question.
pointless was it before them? Why did it ever become popular?
Because people like to see the flashy lights
And shiny, yeah, I guess
it's
loud noises and
Plinko.
shiny things. Oh my gosh. So the guy who played George was in a couple other movies. Nothing super notable out of any of these people. I think the only notable thing was that they all did a lot of TV and like a lot of like the Perry Masons and like all of the Dragnet and all of the TV shows you think of in the 50s. They just made their rounds. And the lady who played the mom, who looked like she was the understudy of Joan Crawford.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever
She
happened
did.
to Baby Jane. She was in Emergency, which was the old 70s TV show with the police station and stuff like that. And what I noticed is that she was like in 15 different episodes, all as a different character. And I noticed that throughout all of their history, they were like, was on Dragnet 15 times and like 15 different names. So they must have just had a stable of, capable actors or whatever. And they just would, American Horror Story, just use them every season as someone else.
Blonde girl at the hospital.
Yeah.
Blonde girl at the grocery store.
I was all excited. I thought she was one of the main people from Emergency because the main lady from Emergency was like 60 years old
Yeah,
when that
she
show
was-
was on.
she
She was
was-
not young. She was not.
The one with the little hats.
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
I loved her.
Oh, that was so great.
The main guy, George, he was in a fantastic episode of the Twilight Zone called "I Shot an Arrow into the Air."
Ooh.
It was one of those space episodes where the astronauts land on a deserted planet, and then they end up turning on each other and killing each other because they're running low on water. And then the one guy eventually, after he kills everyone else and takes their water, sets off on a journey and realizes that the rocket ship had crashed on Earth.
I remember
Oh,
that episode.
I
Yeah,
wasn't
the
there-
main guy, that's George.
Okay. Yeah, and he was also, I think we mentioned this at the up top, but he was also in 12 Angry Men. He was juror number 6.
Yeah, so he clearly had the best acting
Yeah.
career.
Totally.
of
This is
anyone
on
in
his,
this movie.
and this was, I think, the film directly after 12 Angry Men was this film for him.
Hey, it was a lead role.
It was a lead role. The other thing I noticed about the mom, she played the voice of Norma Bates in Psycho, Psycho 2, and Psycho 3. Norma Bates, the mother of Norman Bates.
That's the mother in here?
She was the voice because the mother was,
Uh-huh.
obviously dead,
But
and
would
so
just
she
talk to
was
Norman.
she was the voice of
Interesting.
yeah, which I thought was pretty crazy.
That's neat.
And then Ruth, our dear Ruth,
Yeah.
who was really, like, legitimately great in this movie, probably because she was actually terrified the whole time
Yeah.
because of all the people trying to rape her constantly. And who I wrote about, I hope she has a better life someday. So, Mark, what happened to our dear Ruth? She
So, so she was how old in this?
Around-
movie? Probably.
in this
17,
movie, she was supposed to
17,
be
18.
16 or 17.
Yeah, and so that was 57. So just in 1970, so 13 years later, she took her own life with a gun
Yeah.
and committed suicide.
So she had done a couple other acting gigs that looked like after that, and then married someone. I don't know the whole story, but yeah, sadly, the best thing about this movie was our dear Ruth.
She burned fast, burned bright.
She did. She gave us everything she had in Portland Exposé, but yeah, she was
And
pretty
Portland
great,
is all the
so-
better for it.
Right, and she was on. She was also in House on Haunted Hill, the
Oh,
Vincent
yeah,
Price
right.
movie.
Yep.
Was her big breakout before this. So, anything else about this movie?
I don't know. Would you tell folks that they should watch it?
People in Portland, I think so, because it shows a historical perspective of Portland that you don't see, like the old establishing shot. If nothing else, like it's part of the Portland portfolio of
Canon.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that too. I don't know that I would go through the effort of going to
It's only
movie
an hour long.
madness
I would say it's any excuse to go to Movie Bandits
That's
is
true.
worth
That
it.
is that is
Yep.
true. That is true. If you're a noir film, this isn't an example of a good
Right.
noir film.
Right.
But for
not
sure,
Standard.
I don't feel
would
like
say
it
it's-
was particularly clever. Like I don't think that there was a
No.
big twist or anything.
Right.
It was pretty like
I think it was more plain on the like based on a true story, see as it happened type.
It was the
type,
CSI of its time, ripped from the headlines.
yeah.
I would say for sure, at least look at the different screenshots that we put up, just so you can see what the town looked like.
Right.
But I wouldn't say it's a bad movie,
No.
but I wouldn't say it's a good one.
No, I would say if you have more than a passing interest in seeing what Portland looked like in 1957,
Totally.
then it's definitely worth your
And
time.
it was kind of fun to see like an old timey noir movie, even though, like
Yeah.
we said, it wasn't a good example, but just like
Right.
the way that they talked and the acting style and like all
Right.
of that stuff, how much it's changed, just as much as the geography
And
of the city.
It was really cool to see like people's take on Portland back in that time.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
how
coming
we're-
for your city too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You could watch this alongside Double Indemnity or something and get like a really good film noir and a Portland
Right. Our effort at it.
our effort.
there was one thing I wanted to point out on the Wikipedia page for Portland Exposé. I don't know who wrote this. I guess since it's Wikipedia, we could find out. But it says the plot follows a tavern owner in Oregon's latest city, Portland, who is involved. No, whoa. Wait, Oregon's latest
Our
city?
latest city. Like we're dropping them like albums.
In 1957, Portland was the most recent city.
The most recent city. Well, it started with Astoria, and
What a weird way to phrase that.
That
yeah,
is
why
the
would you ever
strangest.
say that? So since it is Wikipedia, I challenge our listeners to go somebody change that.
Somebody go fix that entry at the Portland Expose site. It does have its own page though.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all. I think that's all we had for Portland Expose. So thank you, everyone who joined us, or at least tried to join us on our live feed. But thank you.
Sorry about the audio.
Yeah,
we did correct it, and we got some streaming going. But
oh, we do. Oh, surprise!
we did.
Oh, I didn't know I was being watched.
Yeah.
But most of you are hearing us on the Fun Employment Radio Network, which you can hear us every month when we do our show. There's another new show on the Fun Employment Radio Network called The Well-Adjusted Gamer, which I've been listening to pretty great and may or may not be on in a couple weeks. But do check out Jason is the host of that, Jason Pollard. And so you can check that out. They've got a bunch of great shows you can download for free. You can also subscribe and listen live and interact with their shows as they're doing it. So go check them out at funemploymentradio.com. Other than that, we will see you guys next time, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Quiet.